Welcome to the Talent Current by Root Edge, a podcast about what's happening in talent right now, with a special focus on the people powering the energy and infrastructure transition. I'm your host, Mindy Preffling. I've spent nearly a decade in recruitment, helping some of the most influential companies in renewable energy, power, and digital infrastructure build the teams that drive their growth. Over the years, I've led high-performing recruitment teams, partnered with some of the industry's largest players, and launched and hosted the Soapbox series, a podcast where I spoke with leaders across energy and infrastructure about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, with the Talent Current, I'm evolving those conversations forward. Each episode, we dive into honest discussions with industry leaders about hiring, leadership, culture, and what it takes to stay grounded in a constantly shifting landscape. We'll explore everything from executive search and organizational strategy to leadership coaching and the changing workplace landscape. And we'll shine a light on the women breaking ground in traditionally male-dominated spaces. At Root Edge, our mission is simple: connecting people to energize tomorrow. And this podcast is an extension of that mission. Whether you're scaling a company or building your own career, the Talent Current is your place to stay plugged into how work is changing and who's driving it forward. I'm thrilled today to welcome two incredible women to the Talent Current, Zoe Berkery and Doseke Akporiaye. Both of these women joined me on my previous podcast a year ago, and I'm grateful they were gracious enough to come back and help me launch this new series. First, I'd like to introduce you to Zoe Berkery, Chief Operating Officer at Clean Capital. I first met Zoe about 5 or 6 years ago through Rise when she was a vice president at Clean Capital, and I've followed her through her journey ever since. Watching her develop into the COO role has been inspiring, not just because of her title, but because of how I can see how she leads her team. Zoe is responsible for overseeing corporate operations and managing Clean Capital's growing fleet of clean energy assets, always with a focus on performance, sustainability, and long-term value. Before Clean Capital, Zoe's passion for clean energy brought her to Washington, D.C., where she worked in public policy at the Business Council for Sustainable Energy and the White House Council on Environmental Quality. She's a CELI Fellow and dedicated Rise leader on the board, and someone who brings intelligence, grace, and heart to every room she enters. Joining her is Doseke Akporiaye, Executive Director of Rise, Women of Renewable Industries and Sustainable Energy. I've had the privilege of working with Doseke since she stepped into this role 2.5 years ago. And in that time, I've watched her consistently show up, not just for me personally, but for so many women across the Rise community. I think she knows every single member's name and occupation. She leads with purpose, empathy, and strength, whether she's advocating for industry-wide equity or mentoring individual women in their careers. With over 20 years of executive experience spanning energy, tech, finance, and operations, Doseke brings a powerful combination of strategic vision and social impact to everything she does, and she's helping to reshape the renewable energy sector in ways that matter. We have Doseke. Zoe, welcome to the Talent Current. I'm so excited to have you here with me today.
Very excited to be here.
I'm happy to be here as well. Thank you, Mindy, for having us.
So the last time that we recorded a podcast together, just over a year ago, summer of 2024, things looked a lot different in really every single way. So how I'd like to kick off our episode is talking about how things have evolved in DE&I, particularly within the renewable energy industry. So Doseke, I'd love for you to kick us off and talk about some of the changes that you've seen.
Thanks again, Mindy. Some of the changes we've seen in the industry, and I will go into the technical executive orders. I'll leave that for Zoe, who is knee deep in it, right, with the business that she does. But what we've seen is just a deliberate action to roll back inclusivity programs. What we've seen is a lot of fear mongering. What we've seen is a lot of companies that had access to grants and tax credits to help develop the industry, to help ensure that smaller, medium-sized organizations could come into the industry and could prosper. What we've seen is communities that had access to some of these grants and incentives to build clean energy projects within their community, that there's been a rollback of that. Um, what we've seen are job losses. A lot of our community members are losing their jobs and they're scaling back. I, and we understand it with the uncertainty in the industry. Companies and businesses have to take, action and plan for the future and the uncertainty of that future. But at the same time, what we've seen is also resilience. We've seen resilience from people within the industry that believe in the value of what we do in the benefit of clean energy. They believe in the fact that it's important to generate and explore alternative sources of energy that are clean, that are good for the environment. And they believe that this is an industry that creates an opportunity to address some of those systemic challenges and barriers and differences that we see by creating a level playing field for people to come in and push the idea. So, in as much as we've received a lot of blows in the industries, and we've seen that translate to uncertainty, to job losses, um, and just to livelihoods being lost, in some communities, to emergency services being cut off in off-grid low or rural communities where, where renewable energy, formed was a good backup for systems, from the grid that collapsed. But we're not seeing that again. We're seeing families being affected. We're seeing families that were involved in development projects, in their communities, with companies rolling back, they're losing their jobs, right? So that's what we're seeing. But we're also seeing that resilience and that hope. And again, clean energy still remains the fastest and the most cost-effective energy source to deploy. And that is the good news and the narrative that we must hold on to meet the rise in energy demands that we see. It may be driven, by AI and data centers, but it's still increasing, right? Um, and we need to find a way to meet that demand.
I think there's like, to your point, Doseke, there's just like fundamental truths about the foundation of what the clean energy industry is, about the foundation of what DEI is,
Mhm,
that will remain true and at their core are completely uncontroversial.
mhm,
But there's been sort of a misalignment or this misperception around what both are, and obviously we sort of sit at the intersection of them. And I think while there's been this extreme pullback and like the executive order that was signed on day one of Trump's administration with the title, which I think is interesting, ending radical and wasteful government DEI programs and preferencing, and that preferencing piece is like the core of the conception for me around what DEI is
mhm,
that like inclusivity is in the title of it, and yet
mhm,
it has become seen as this preferential exclusionary movement. And I think that's what we sort of as a group
mhm.
need to reflect on, and
Yeah.
that's, I think there's actually opportunity there to change that. But yeah, it's been sort of interesting to dissect that.
Yeah, and it's interesting, just feeding off what Zoe has said, what a lot of people forget, there were so many programs that were beneficial to
Yeah.
people like veterans, for example. It
Mhm.
gave them a second career. To people with disability, it gave them the opportunity to come in and be able to, start another career and find work and look after their families and give their families dignity. So I think and I think sometimes when people think about the DEI, they just assume it's a race thing or it's a
Mhm.
gender thing. No, it goes beyond that.
Yeah.
It's about saying how can we ensure everyone, has an opportunity to benefit and have economic prosperity within this sector. It's about the veterans that have come back. They're still young, still have life. They've been highly trained by our country and the government, and they want to continue to serve by utilizing their skills within this industry that they can use. And right to Zoe's point, it's ch- just changing that mindset of what DEI is.
Yeah, I think we've really lost our way in terms of what DEI means. I mean, even with the title, Zoe, that you read for the was that for the bill, or was that
Order. Yeah.
the
There's an
executive
example.
order?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like DEI now needs a rebrand, and or what Doseke, what you were saying, like a mindset shift. So maybe let's use this as an opportunity to talk about what DEI is, because I think we know what it isn't. It's not just about race. What is DEI?
So I think one of the learnings from all that has been happening is sometimes we need to break down some of these words in a way that is it's simple for people to understand. And for me, when I think about DEI, I just think of a fair and inclusive system.
Mm-hmm.
I think of a fair system where whoever you are, whether you're a man, you're a woman, you're whatever your gender, your orientation is, that you want to come into a place where from the onset, the odds are not stacked up against you. Right from the recruiting process, that the policies, the processes are such that they look at your skills, your ability, the merit that you bring into that organization or that setting, and the system should be designed to extract that. That for me is what DEI is. It's really about saying I want to create a system where I get the best people, but the best people don't always look a particular way, don't always sound a particular way, don't always show up in a particular way. And so let me have an open mind to attract the best and to attract the people that have these unique skill sets to come into an environment for us to be productive, right?
Mm-hmm.
This next step is when I bring all these different people that are the best at different things, how do I ensure that within that ecosystem, within that organization, that my policies, my processes, my the actions that I take are reflective of how these people can feel empowered, how they can develop, and how they can feel confident that the leadership or the system within which they exist is advocating for them, irrespective of who they are. That is what DEI is for me. And I think a lot of the time when we shift that focus and try to put some specific definition of what DEI is, then we get into arguments about, what it is and lose focus, on the intent behind it. The intent is to make sure all of us rise. Pun intended, right? the, intent is to make sure that we all can grow. We all can develop to the best of our capabilities. Not everybody wants to be a CEO. There are people that just want to be the best that they can be up to the level. And DEI for me is about making sure we give them that opportunity to do that.
Yeah. I heard a really great quote on a daily recently from Brene Brown. I wonder how many times Brene Brown is quoted on other podcasts, but I'll be the continued cliche. But it really resonated with me where she said original DEI programs were meritocracy programs when done well, plain and simple. The programs, they were there to ensure that the invisible kind of quote unquote favoritism bias was being checked, and that allowed those that weren't visible to be seen. And like that is what it is. And like to me that is uncontroversial, but it has been lost along the way. And I think people do become incredibly defensive when they think that their power or their place in society or their, leadership, status is being threatened. Anyone would. And you say it enough that these programs are doing that, people start to believe it.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of core to the issue. And I think there is, I like to use this analogy as I was kind of thinking through our conversation today. The reality is there's enough pie for everyone. There's enough
That was exactly what I was going to
like,
say.
we're going to move away from the cliche, like a seat at the
Yeah,
table. It's like, we
yeah,
just need a big enough kitchen. Like,
yeah.
we all get the pie.
It's enough.
And like, so we kind of just all need to be a little bit more of adults about the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I kind of, during our conversations leading up to this podcast, we talked about this concept of a rebrand. And I really like that. And I was also reflecting on just how Clean Capital as an organization has tried to be cognizant of just the environment that we're operating in now. And the truth of the matter is, whether my marketing team wants me to say this or not, I think our website at one point had more mentions of climate change and sustainability and the clean energy revolution and transition. And now you'll see terminology closer, more aligned to energy independence and energy dominance. Are all of those things just as true today as they were on January 19th before, Trump was reelected? Yes, like we are still a part of the climate change solution toolkit, but we are also part of the toolkit to get us to energy independence and dominance. So, all of that is still true. And I think it's the same with DEI. Is it about diversity, equity, and inclusion? Of course. Is it also, to Doseke's point, spot on? Is it also about finding the best people, bringing people up in their earnings level and potential, and as a result, making our businesses, organizations, and missions as successful as they possibly could be? 100%. So maybe it's sort of like we're now just focusing on the latter. And does it mean we're giving up our sort of morals and the core of it being around diversity, equity, inclusion? No, but I think how we kind of frame the conversation, maybe it is a learning and sort of a reckoning for the movement in this day and age. And we should hopefully, see it as an opportunity maybe. And same for the clean energy industry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more with you, Zoe, about that scarcity mentality that seems to exist. And it's interesting because when, at least as at 3 or 4 years ago, the narrative was we needed 1 million jobs every year for 10 years. Now, that has not changed, right? So no one is taking anyone's jobs. We need 1 million people to come into the industry every year for at least 8 years now in that 10-year runway that initially started when we're looking at the tax credits. And if we continue to grow and develop this industry, those opportunities still exist. So it's really about changing that narrative of the scarcity mindset and just trying to highlight the fact that speaking to the needs that are going to be met. Typically, in most economies, you get incentives to develop the industry and the market so that the cost of that output is a little bit less. When you remove those incentives, then it's more expensive to develop that industry. And then the cost of your electricity goes up. It has nothing to do with politics. It's just economics, and it's just, business. So you can spin any narrative that you want to spin around it. But if you really understood what is causing my electricity to be expensive, and I think we need to do a better job, as people that believe in this industry, in explaining, in simple terms, so that especially the naysayers will begin to understand how this is good for them. It's good for them because their energy costs will come down. It's good for them because they can earn more money. All right. It's good for them because they can look after their families.
We have two different sort of issues that we have kind of coming, or like going along side by side. There's the renewable energy industry and the impact of the new administration and the bill on the industry and the impact that it's had on jobs, job creation, and people being displaced in the industry. And then from what I'm hearing, the disproportionate impact on the DEI community within the renewable energy industry, especially as it pertains to job security. And so there's two different subjects that we're talking about: how the industry is moving forward and the importance of the industry, and how we brand the industry. And Zoe, I've spoken to other developers in the industry who are doing the same thing, rebranding what you talked about with Clean Capital, rebranding what they're doing, because it's about energy independence and it's about energy procurement at the end of the day. Is there enough energy to sustain the demands that we have? And rather than, being clean or being green, then there's also the issue of, continuing the industry and still focusing on DEI, which we know because we've talked about it before, not just us on this podcast, but the industry and experts have talked about how DEI actually increases the bottom line. And that's where I think the rebrand for DEI can have an impact, is the benefit it has to the business. Mm-hmm. Something that's been talked about before, but I think previously it's the right thing to do. But Doseke, to your point, it's not just the right thing to do, it's the thing that makes the most business sense.
Yeah, and we have data to support that, right? We have data. I think it was BCG that did research that companies with higher gender diversity in the workforce, they're 39% more likely to outperform than other companies, and 35% more likely to have financial returns that are above the industry median. So we have seen this, and if we look at it from a founder perspective, we have data that shows that women outperform return on investment by, I think, $1 or so more than their male counterpart founders. But we see that that investment in women founders is still less compared to their male counterparts. So in terms of risk profile, again, the investment in female founders, that risk profile is actually also less than in male founders. So there's data to support all of this, and to show that just having diversity, we have data to show that having a diverse team increases your the product development from a market perspective. We have all this data, and so it's really not about, again, race, gender, or ethnicity. It's about, it is good for business, and we have the data that shows that it is good for business.
Right. Like any good investor is thinking about how to hedge on an investment, right? And so if you're taking an idea or an investment thesis and you're adding additional perspectives to ensure that you're thinking about any possible risk, you're making yourself a better investor. So I think in any sort of business or organization, having that diversity of perspectives and input will inevitably make you more successful. And as you said, Doseke, I mean, BCG, McKinsey, there have been many reports that have shown, and it wasn't, an isolated data set. It was like 2014, 2017, 2019. They kept revisiting these metrics, and they were going up and up and up each time, showing that having gender diversity at the executive level meant that the top, 25% of organizations were outperforming their peers in profitability. Then same with, cultural and diversity. And then additionally, it kind of, when you paired them, then it meant profitability went up even more. And then the same was true of the inverse, that the bottom quartile underperformed significantly. So, while maybe this isn't exactly causation, it's correlation, it's still important, and the data is there. And while there may be other contributing factors, it's all interconnected and part of the conversation.
So if we look 3 to 5 years ahead, and I know that's really difficult, especially right now, especially with how much change we've experienced in the last 12 months, what do you think the long-term impacts will be on the companies that do continue to prioritize DEI?
So I think for Clean Capital, while we talked about this rebrand, in terms of kind of the industry, I think in terms of our programs related to DEI, we're sort of business as usual in a lot of ways. I mean, we still have, our internship program that's focused on getting folks into the industry that don't have a background in the industry. And, we see that as sort of a key part of growing our network and doing our part both as a company and, being a player in the industry to grow, who is getting access to experience and to opportunities within companies in the clean energy space. But same with our recruitment practices. We ensure that, we're reaching a large network before we make an offer to someone, I think, so in a way, potentially we could, change how we're discussing those programs, but they're still the same at their fundamental core. And I think we're seeing it just this over the summer. Mindy helped place a number of folks at our company. I'm so grateful because they're amazing. And, we're sort of lucky to be in that position where we actually have made hires during a difficult time for the industry. Great problems to have. But I've seen during my interviews with folks that they are excited when they look at our team page. They want to be a part of a company that has women in leadership, that has a diverse team. And so that means we are attracting the best talent. It's like we're seeing it play out, and it's something we're really proud of, and we're never going to stop because it's good. It's good for our bottom line as well as the broader conversation.
Mhm.
So I think it will, only companies will only benefit from continuing and growing these types of programs.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And we've seen from our community when we poll our community and ask them some of the drivers in the organizations that they want to work for. Interestingly, Zoe, I was talking to someone last week and that had a rough experience. She's in climate finance. And has been laid off, and she was like, "Oh, I'm going to leave. I no longer want to be in climate finance." I'm like, "Really? You want to leave our industry? Why? We don't want you to leave." She's like, "Well, except there's an opportunity with companies like Clean Capital. So kudos to you, I have to say."
Love to hear
She
that.
actually mentioned. So it means that again, just reinforcing that a lot of these people, the work you do, the consistency in the work, and the fact that people just feel like there's a genuine commitment to that without you putting it and blasting it on your website, but they see it in the actions that you take in, like you
Mhm.
said, your website that has the leadership of women, but also they're engaging with these women in the industry, and are seeing that they're not just token hires. So people that want to go into these organizations, they want to see that you're genuine, you're truly committed to it, and that when the going gets tough, that's when you dig in. They also want to see, within your organizations that you have programs, that help them grow.
Mm-hmm.
For some of these people, you may find the best talent, and their background and their journey is different from someone that went to an Ivy League school, that has the benefit of grooming, that has the benefit of being in certain social circles, that has the benefit of networking or legacy, right? But they're brilliant. Right. And we may even do better than some of these people that come from a privileged background. And so when they get into the organization, they want to see that there are systems to support them, that
Mhm.
the systems will help them feel included. If they don't know how to handle certain conversations, that you will be supportive of them to help them handle some of those conversations. And I think that it's critical, and that these organizations, if they don't have the capacity to provide these in-house, will join other larger organizations that can help them provide that support, to make sure that their employees feel like they're part of a system that is committed and vested in their growth, their success, and their ability to thrive within those organizations.
Yeah.
It's really interesting, Doseke, because you haven't seen the results of the salary survey yet, and we are still putting together the results, but I've been looking at it
Mhm.
this week and analyzing the data, and everything you said is exactly what came out in the salary and sentiment survey. So I'm really excited
Maybe we
for.
should talk a bit about the salary and sentiment survey and why we decided to partner to do it.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think exactly everything that we're talking about to support not just the anecdotal evidence that people care about diversity and leadership, but that's actually what attracts people to organizations and then motivates them to put together development plans and pursue leadership positions. If you just hire somebody because of their diversity, that's not necessarily going to take you to the destination that you're going to. But if you intentionally build a team that is diverse and you show that that's something that's important to the organization, then people are going to be attracted to that. And Clean Capital is such a good example of that. And I love recruiting for your team and I love recruiting for your organization because you really practice what you preach. And then, so anecdotally, I can share from a recruitment standpoint what we've experienced. And you two as leaders in the industry can anecdotally share that you've seen that. But the reason why we put together the salary and sentiment survey in collaboration with Rise is to support that with quantitative evidence that this is really what people care about in the industry. And I don't have the final percentage points off the top of my head because we're still configuring all the results. But one of the number one reasons that people will seek new job opportunities to leave their current employers is because they don't have a diverse leadership team.
Interesting. Very interesting. Wow. And I think as we are getting into an interesting phase within the industry where we are going more into communities to develop projects, and with data centers and AI, we are, we're beginning to see communities becoming very, very vocal, right? About, this development. DEI, for lack of another word, becomes so critical because inclusivity is the bedrock of DEI. And as you're going into these communities, if you're not going with that mindset of inclusivity, your projects are not going to be successful. And inclusivity it goes again, it goes beyond race, gender, color, whatever. Because in these communities where we're doing some of these projects, they're not communities of color, right? But that mindset and that principle of going in with, how do I ensure that I understand the community that I'm going in? How do I make sure I include them? How do I ensure that I am providing benefits beyond the playground, that I'm building, How am I understanding the needs of that community and providing something as part of the projects that we do that economically empowers them beyond just reducing their energy bills? And if you that is the mindset of DEI. That's essentially what DEI is about, is that I want to make sure wherever I operate, wherever I find myself, that I am cognitive of everyone. I'm cognitive of their peculiarities. I'm cognitive of their needs. And I'm deploying systems that ensure that even while I reap the benefits as a corporate, but they also feel like they are gaining something out of it, that they're growing and they're benefiting as well. It's exactly the same model. And so if you're, I dare say, if you're challenging that model from a DI perspective, then it'll be difficult for you to have successful projects when you go into communities, because it is exactly the same mindset, right? You don't change your ethos, from one way to another when in your business. It just cuts across all that you do. And if you don't have that ethos in your organization at that level, right, when you find that you're growing and expanding and interacting with multiple stakeholders, that is going to manifest, right? And that is not good for business.
Right. And that's true, I think, of almost any type of development, to have like longevity of success, to not be inclusionary of the surrounding communities. It will be a very kind of short-term success. Either the project won't get built or the next project won't get built. And I also think there's sort of a reputational aspect exactly for the industry when a developer, sort of plows through, doesn't listen to the community, designs a project that they hate, or then doesn't responsibly decommission it and leaves it for the town to deal with. That then hurts all future projects going forward, because the town over heard about that, the town over from there heard about that, and it hurts our ability to build. And so I think it behooves us to always play nice and get input. Otherwise, it will be incredibly limiting down the road.
A point that you had made, Doseke, outside of this recording is that, you can understand how companies have gone into a sort of survival mode with everything that's happened in the industry. And a lot of companies have reacted and are kind of like, bailing out the boat, as it were. And when we go into survival mode, we know that we go into our monkey brain. And I think corporations are going into their corporate monkey brain. So they're not really thinking strategically, they're thinking about survival. So what I'm hearing with how this can impact the business and, just looking at the project level, then, how can a company step back, take a moment to reflect before going into bailout survival mode, assess what the business needs are before making these decisions?
Mm-hmm. So I want to be very real. Our industry is going through a tough time right now, and I mean I've run businesses, so it is a tough. It's very tough because you have to make decisions about how can I ensure I'm alive to even fight the battle in a couple of years. So we're going through a tough time, and there are very tough business decisions that need to be made. So I'm not going to sugarcoat it and just, this is not a kumbaya. It's a tough time for the industry, and businesses have to make decisions. With the cuts that we're seeing, even though some of it is not happening yet, they have to project into the future. A lot of companies are rushing now to safe harbor their projects, and to access some of the credits, the tax credits that they have within that period of time. But they also have to be saying to themselves, okay, after that, what happens? How do I manage my costs? How do I save some money? So in case I'm not able to generate capital in a timely fashion, or I'm not able to access capital, how do I continue to run this project? How do I continue to survive as an organization? So these are some of the realities they're facing, and it should not and cannot be underestimated. The pressure that the companies within the industry are going through right now, and how do we ensure that we still continue to do the work that we do. So these are very tough decisions that companies are going through, and I don't want to underestimate that. But that said, it is in the moments of crisis that opportunities also exist, right? And how do you go about, if, for example, you want to lay off people? How is that selection process done? Is it transparent? Is it based on merit? Or is it based on bias? If you have to cut back on salaries, what is that process? How do you communicate that process to people? Because these are hard conversations and decisions that we need to make. How do you ensure that you're being inclusive as much as possible in that process so people feel like these decisions were made based on an objective and transparent process, and they don't feel like the inherent bias that was already in the system has just been used in the decisions that you made? So again, they're very trying times, and it'll be foolhardy of me to say, you won't take tough decisions. You have to make tough decisions.
Yeah. Yeah, it's making decisions with integrity, is, I think, kind of the key bottom line. But then also, to your point around, in the toughest times, there are sometimes that kernel of opportunity. I think perhaps, while clean energy is by no means a new industry, I think it is young when compared to other, forms of energy. And potentially this is, it's sort of a hardening of the business environment right now. But I think on the other side of it, we will be more resilient. There isn't a playbook yet for this era of the clean energy
If
industry.
there was, Zoe, you would have scrapped it and started rewriting it.
Yeah. So it will only make
Yeah.
the participants within the industry smarter, more resilient, and ready for the next headwind. And we can take advantage even more when those tailwinds come back around, hopefully at some point.
Yeah.
I believe they will. And I like that hopeful point to end our conversation. I think we've covered a lot of ground today, where we came from, how we can rebrand and change our mindset about DEI, and how to be objective and fair when making hard decisions that many companies are facing right now with the headwinds that we have in our industry.
I think these conversations are so important and really help me reflect on kind of where we were, where we're at, where we're going. While this conversation, there were some threads to our conversation a year ago. It is fascinating how much has changed, and but I still think it's such a rich conversation, and there needs to be more like this going on across our industry to sort of maintain perspective, ensure that we are effectively maybe communicating that rebrand so we can stay relevant and keep pushing forward without having to sacrifice anything along the way.
Yeah. And in the spirit of not repeating what Zoe has said, I think the only thing I'll add is, so check, check, check with what you said, Zoe. You need community now more than ever. And Rise is a community you can be part of. It's a community where you can get the support, the encouragement, the connections. It's where you will hear about opportunities. It's where you will be motivated and encouraged. And we have 48 chapters across the country. So check us out, find a chapter closest to you. But we also have our national conference, the Leadership Forum, coming up October 14th to 16th in Atlanta, Georgia. So if you in the area, or you want to be motivated and inspired, and you want to hear about those opportunities that you can take advantage of in these trying times, that is really the environment for you to be at. So it's the Rise Leadership Forum, October 14th to 16th in Atlanta, Georgia. And if there are other communities, we welcome everyone to join the Rise community. But if that's not the community for you, you need to find a community, because in these times, you really need that support. This is not a kumbaya support. This is a support in terms of practical terms of what can I do? Where are there opportunities? I need a job, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which companies are hiring? How do I position myself? I want to transition from this role. What kind of transferable skills, do I have? As the industry is changing, what are the kind of transferable skills that are required, to be able to take advantage of those emerging sectors that we're seeing in the industry that are not slowing down but are growing aggressively. Rise community provides that, but if it's not, make sure you're part of a community that is empowering you, educating you, you're developing, and you're growing as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And I can say, speaking personally firsthand, the Rise community has been exactly that for me over the last 7 years that I've been active in the Colorado chapter. And in the last couple of years, I've really gotten much more, started participating a lot more in the national organization and just building the relationship with you, Doseke. And I can say that I have built really meaningful friendships, and I've built some really meaningful professional relationships, and some that intersect, and I get to have both, like with Zoe. So I'm really, really grateful for the Rise community. And I think especially with starting up my own business this year, I need this community, and I believe others need it too. So big fan of Rise and what you're doing and what you've done with the organization in the last 2.5 years. Really looking forward to seeing you both in Atlanta in 2 weeks. And yeah, and thank you too so much for your support and advocacy. Thank you for joining me today. This is your host, Mindy Preffling, and that's it for this episode of The Talent Current. Thanks for listening, and if you enjoyed the conversation, please be sure to subscribe and share. I'll be back soon with more insights to keep you connected to how our industry is changing and the people shaping what's next.